Calling all beings. Calling all beings.
Hey, welcome back to Calling All Beings. I am Boston Dia. Hope you all are doing great tonight. So I have the honor and pleasure tonight. We have two great guests coming on, retired Sergeant Peter Murphy and retired attorney ValHaLLaw. So unfortunately, DJ's feeling a little under the weather. So you have me for tonight as your host. So thank you all for joining. And without further ado, let's see who's backstage. Hey!
Hey!
Yes, I'll be like DJ. Can we get an amen? Amen.
Amen. Great to see you, Bia.
Good to see you too. Val, how are you? So I think Val is on mute.
Okay.
All right. So
there we go.
Oh, there we go. How are you? Yes.
All right. All right. I'm sorry to hear about DJ. That sucks.
I know, but that's all right. He sent me in as a replacement. So how are you doing, Val?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm looking at Peter and thinking he looks happier than I've seen him before. Are you thinking about the win yesterday?
Oh, you nailed it. You playing on with that one, Val. And very, by the way, very nice to talk to you, meet you, and discuss things with you. I'm really looking forward to it. You can tell me a little more about your Massachusetts history, I guess, at some point. But yeah, no, we are living the dream after what happened last night. You probably know what the vote count was. We were close to 3,300 to 1,700. It was a landslide, and it was very, very positive. And I think the town today had a great day in general. I think they see the light at the end of the tunnel for improvement in the quality of life for everybody.
That's right. So were you watching Val, were you watching the results of the election?
Yes. Well, I got in a bit of a frenzy because I was jumping around to all the different channels talking about it. And it was a little confusing because a lot of people were going off John Camo's stream, I think. And then, of course, Mike at the Young Turks. It was both very exciting and like such a relief, like just, oh my God, thank God. Like,
yep.
And I think my follow-up question for Peter, which you sort of have already answered, is leading up to the election, did you have a sense that this is the way it would go, or was it like a nail biter at the end, or
Well, I guess I could answer that with two responses. Val, one would be, I did the standouts holding Susan Harrington signs for, I think, 3 out of the 4 weeks or whatever it was that we did standouts on weekends. And we did them at 3 different locations, or two and 3 different locations in the town. And I can tell you that we probably had a group of 12 to 15 on any time that we did a standout. And the opponent, the incumbent, I'm not even going to mention his name, his group was standing about 12, 15 feet to our right or towards the north. And people coming up to our left would see our signs first, obviously, and they would beep and wave and thumbs up and high five, and they were so animated, and it grew with every weekend that we were there. And I mean, we just felt the momentum and I think the enthusiasm that the town had enough. Enough is one of our signs that we hold out in front of the police station twice a week. And I think enough is enough said it all. And they were ready for change. They saw it They saw the need for it, and they pushed the buttons.
That was
It
amazing.
was good. Yeah, it was really good. And to Susan's credit, she had a masterful organization for campaign organization, and they had, I'm not going to say they had algorithms, but they had a lot of data and statistics and what the votes for Conley had been over the last 4 decades, and they had it dialed in. They knew if we could get a big number of people to the polls that we would overpower him and take the wheel, Jesus. We did it.
I know, that's amazing. I saw that she had, Rita had mentioned earlier that she had gone to over 2,000 houses, like door to door.
Yes.
And that's amazing.
She did door knocks. 2,000 is right. That's a good number. I know they did a phone bank. They did calls. They did postcards. They did meet and greets. They went to different forums and venues. She did a great job. And I didn't actually know her before I got involved in this campaign. I certainly knew the other individual, and I was very, very impressed with her. I'm very, very impressed with her. Her sincerity, her willingness to listen to people was incredible. And I think she's going to do a magnificent job. I really do.
Yeah, and I think she's definitely been paying attention. I see her at the select board meetings. Well, now that they're back in person, and she's always there paying attention and ready to speak up. So good for her. And great for the town of Canton, that's for sure. So Val, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
I think I talked to DJ about this a little bit. I'm kind of paranoid about my anonymity.
Oh, of course, yeah. No,
so
we get it.
I don't necessarily. I've just had some kind of unique experiences in my life, and I would be easily recognizable with certain information. But I graduated from law school in the mid '90s. I passed in 2 different states, and early on, I clerked for a couple judges, which is where a lot of my interest in the cases that I watch now, and especially this case, where you have this sort of very complicated ball of all sorts of legal issues, and can you appeal them, and can the judge get away with X, Y, and Z, all these things. Like, that's where it really comes from. And I'm just as Brother Counsel says, I'm just a law nerd. So, the deeper the dive possible, the better.
So what type of law did you practice? Do you mind sharing that with us?
Well, it was more general practice, but not litigation. Like, I haven't been in the courtroom. So in that sense, I'm like everyone else who's a court watcher. I may be a little more obsessed than some people. But mostly that's it, right? Like the applying. It's kind of funny because it's amazing how much that you learn in law school that stays in your head. And then you're just sitting around and you hear someone say something on the stream, and you're like, all of a sudden you're just like spurting out by rote what the standard is. Mm-hmm. And if you're sitting around with a bunch of lawyers, very often it's in unison.
That's really funny.
So what made you take an interest in the Karen Read? Like, how did you hear about it? Like, just on the news, like all of us here?
Yep. In the beginning of my story, it's like 99% of us. I heard about it on the news, and I thought, oh my God, that's horrible. And I did a little there but for the grace of God moment, and I didn't really pay attention until I think it was like the end of 2023, when a friend of mine was telling me all about the case, and it just sounded insane, because you know how hard it is to explain to a new person. And even then, I was kind of like, oh, okay, but was it really a police conspiracy? I mean, that's what they all say, right? Like, I think there's some saying like, oh, there are no guilty people in prison. They're all innocent, right? According to them. And then after that, Melanie Little started covering it. And we all know, the progression of that. And then I started getting into the documentation and stuff. And I was just thinking about this today. There was one thing that I started to see in the pretrial hearing documents and then in the hearings and the trial itself is the prosecution was engaged in a very particular kind of lying that for me is always like a really, really huge red flag. And I looked it up, there's even a name for it. It's called paltering. And the definition of paltering is the art of lying by telling the truth. So one of the clearest examples, which we hadn't seen yet in the trial, is, they did the DNA tests, and then all of a sudden the prosecution's running around saying, oh, John's DNA was on the taillight. It's definitive, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, technically that is true. But you the speaker know that when you were saying that, the person listening to you is receiving that information with a totally different meaning. And you know that, like, you're doing that purposely.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because, it was touch DNA, so it really doesn't matter. It's not even, they're not even like arguing about facts. They're trying to insert lies into the case. And that's not the only time they did it. All along, they're kind of inserting these lies throughout the case.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I just find it really offensive, and it really is. It's a red flag. It doesn't matter if it's a criminal case. It doesn't matter, criminal, civil, big, little, a lot of publicity, no publicity. If you are watching a case and one side, like when it comes time to show the evidence and you match it to what they've been telling you about it, and you see that it has that mismatch between technical truth and real truth, that side should lose. Right? They don't have a case, and they are verging on very unethical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that you don't really need a lot of people for corruption either. You only need a few key players to, for this to have gone on and continue to be going on. So Peter, and how did you first hear about the case?
Well, I think probably like most people here in the Boston area, I saw it on the news. I saw pictures of the house, the snow, and it was probably on it was either the 29th or the 30th of January that I saw, the initial broadcast that there had been a tragic death allegedly caused by a motor vehicle by the victim's girlfriend. And having been a cop for almost 3 decades and wanting to be one all my life, I believed the narrative that was being told by law enforcement. Why wouldn't I? And I worked in the organizations, in police department for all those years. I believed in the judicial system as being believable and authentic and trustworthy. And did I have some questions over the years as far as when I saw cases unfold or I testified and how things might have gone? But for the most part, I believed in the system. And then all of a sudden, that was in January of 29, almost February 1st of 2022. And then obviously in 23 of April, things started to unravel. The onion got peeled back. Autopsy pictures were becoming available. Turtle Boy cracked open his case. I have a Boston police officer who lives very close to me, and I asked him about it. I said, "What's going on at the water bubble, right? What are you hearing? What do you know? What's being said?" And he said, "Mum's the word. Nobody is saying a goddamn thing about it." Now, this is a Boston police officer, many, many, many years, and he said, "It's quiet, crickets." And that raised some red flags right away. And I said, "That's odd, isn't it?" And he goes, "Well, I'll leave it to your discretion." But he said, "Do you know Turtle Boy?" And I said, "Turtle Boy? What the hell is that? A cartoon?" He goes, "No." He said, he told me what he is. He's a professional journalist, blogger, and all that. I said, "Oh, okay." And I started watching that, and I listened to that. And I mean, it was basically, it was the physical evidence. It was the arm, the picture of the arm. And I just couldn't ever go back to not thinking that she's innocent.
Right. So there's a question here from Mary Lewis saying, what can you tell us about the missing plaque?
Who was that directed to?
To you, Peter.
Oh, okay. The missing plaque. Do we know what that? I need more info on what the missing plaque is, I think.
Yeah.
Do you know what that refers to?
No clue.
Missing
Let me
plaque.
see.
Missing plaque.
And because somebody else said, I heard this too and would like to hear Peter's thought and why Helena would do that. Yeah. All right. So, Mary, if you can expand on that question, let us know what you're referring to.
Could that be the plaque? The only thing I can think of here is that inside the foyer of the main entry room to the Canton Police Station at 1492 Washington Street, there was a series of plaques on the wall, and it had several police officers' names on them because they have since retired, and my name was on it. And evidently somebody who's been in there recently said that one of the plaques is missing, the one I guess that had my name on it. So I think people are speculating that maybe something's going on specifically inherent to my my plaque on my name. I that's the only thing I can attribute to what that question's for. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of sounds, because Dennis is saying plaque in the lobby was down there adding a name. So, interesting.
That's usually why they would take it down. When somebody else is retired and they had a plaque made or a name tag made up and they were going to insert it, but that would be a guess. No receipt.
Dennis is
No
saying
yeah.
we asked. So, okay. So that clears up that confusion.
All right. Good.
Sounds good.
Wait, so no, I'm confused. So there's multiple names on a plaque?
Yes, it's
Oh, okay. All right.
Sort of like a plaque of honor, Val, where there's a list of police officers that I guess they're indicating that, or the administration's indicating that they served admirably and left in good standing.
I see. So presumably the plaque goes back up with the additional name, but your name is still there.
It would be on the plaque that hopefully gets replaced up there, and I hope they didn't take my name down. But it's possible.
Well, I just thought that maybe was why people were asking, because I would be like, those dirty dogs. Like,
are you familiar with the case part of my story that I was brought to court for trespassing on private property, to which the church next door? You can see the church in the background here. If I move, you see that white symbol? That's a church immediately adjacent to the Canton Police Station. They actually share a common driveway. And I was criminally charged back on December 27th for trespassing on private property of the church. The individual beside me was never charged. He was never even addressed by the two sergeants. And the sign that was 10 inches by 10 inches, black in color, was under a big pile of snow and was not visible to the human eye. Yet they still charged me, and they've charged a lot of other individuals over the course of time, if you're familiar with the case, as far as just sort of, how would I say it, intimidation and harassment. The Canton 9, Richie Schiffer, the duck guy, Whitey for assault and battery on a public servant, and then the Peter Murphy case, trespassing on church property. and all the cases went south.
Yeah.
Well, yes,
And
I
the-
would hope so.
Right. So yeah, so much for 36 pages for rubber duckies, and that went nowhere.
Right.
And the thing is that they could have just come out and asked you to move. Like they didn't have to have you sit there the whole time and then go home, and then all of a sudden now you're being notified that you were trespassing, right? They should have addressed it while it was happening. Or don't you think, if it was truly a concern?
Well, I raised the question at the time to the sergeant, who I actually have known for a long time, including his family, and I said, I'm not clear on where the elements of this trespassing charge have been met in this instance. I said, I've never been put on notice by anybody. I've never been served anything in writing. And when we got to court, Val will appreciate this. He said, get off the property. I'm not going to discuss the case. I said, sure, sir, I respect that. Respect the uniform and the badge. And I left immediately. I only parked there to exchange some signs with the gentleman beside me. We weren't going to use the property, but we had used the property so many times in the past for standouts. It is recently in a big one on September 14th of that same year, where there were 75 of us, and we all parked there and we were welcome there. But getting back to the actual merits of the case and the elements of the crime, Val, which you probably would like to hear about, we were in the court magistrate hearing, and the question came up, had I been put on notice? And that was raised by my attorney, and the prosecutor for the police department said, yeah, he was put on notice back in September 14th, and there wasn't one of the 75 people that were there that day that ever saw any police officers put anybody on notice. They never even came out. So if I were to tell you that the magistrate couldn't produce that supplemental report, as they called it, that put me on notice, and I didn't have a copy in my discovery, and neither did the lawyer, and neither did the magistrate. It was kind of an, how would I say it, unveiling of perhaps some untruths that were being told about me being put on notice.
So this goes back to a point that Andrea Burkhart, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Andrea,
Yep.
but she often makes, which is the process is the punishment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They can't get at any of us, and hopefully never succeed in getting at Karen. So they use the process to hurt all these people. At the very least, inconvenience them, or like if you, like Peter, you said you had to get a lawyer. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
To hurt them any way they can.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
not
Peter,
only to hurt, but to stifle and discourage you from saying anything or doing any of the standouts or holding a sign, and to send a message to the rest of the people. And I can tell you, I lived in the town for 40 years, Val. I brought my children up in the town, and I have several people still living in the town, relatives and so forth. And I talked to them as recently as Saturday at that audit meeting at the Canton High School.
Yep.
And I want to tell you that fear in Canton is alive and well. People are terrified and afraid of retaliation and a weaponization of the system against them, in their family, in their businesses, in their children, and alienation in school settings. They are paranoid, and hence they sit on their hands and they're afraid to come out and say anything. And that is a horrible way to spend your life, day in and day out in the community.
absolutely. And Val, did you watch any of the audit result meeting on Saturday?
I heard a lot about it, and honestly, I didn't think I could. What I heard was that great disrespect was paid to Peter, and I honestly, I didn't think I could stand to watch that. Like, I was kind of like, okay, I'm gonna be just as disgusted as if I had watched it, and I'm gonna hopefully send that out into the universe and join with all the other people's feelings and have the same effect as if I did watch it. And maybe that was just kind of an excuse, but there are moments in this trial where I'm like, I just don't think I can view this.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I'll view it later. Do you know what I mean? When it's not quite like it didn't just happen, I'll go back and I'll see. Like, there's some people who testify that have a hard time watching when they're live, like especially Jen McCabe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, now that I think of it, a lot of them. But and I think I imagine, or I hope, that the select board victory was some, I don't want to say vengeance, because that's not really what we want to be about, but for Peter, that was like, okay, fine, you guys decided to be big fat jerks, and this is what you get.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know. Where do you see this where do you see the town moving forward, Peter? After this, now we have Susan Harrington as a new select board member. We
Right.
have the audit results coming out. So where do you see the town? How do you see the town moving forward?
Well, I know just in talking to people since last night's certificate. Well, it hasn't been officially, I guess, certified. They have 10 days, I think, to do it. But since the official vote count came in noticeably and substantially indicative that Susan won by 1,500 votes or whatever the final number was. But it was big. It was very big, and I think the direction of the town has sort of it's euphoric. People are feeling like they have finally turned the tide a little bit. Now they have two new select people, and by just happenstance, both women, Trish Boyden and now Susan Harrington. The 40-year repeat offender, John Conley, is gone. He's history. There's a couple of other players, one being Chris Albert, Mike Loughran, who's the chairperson right now, and J.R. McCourt. J.R.'s nephew, by chance, was a Canton police officer and left abruptly after the Birchmore murder.
Oh.
Just went into another line of work, Val, just left the department.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which speaks volumes, as you and be a no. I mean, for somebody to just suddenly bail on a career that most people have wanted all their lives, and his what would it be? His grandfather was a lieutenant in the Canton Police, so he would have been almost like a second generation officer. There's been, I think the count I got yesterday was 13 police officers have fled, for want of a better word, either retired, transferred, or just quit, even sometimes without necessarily tenure or retirement, gone into other lines of work. I think that tells a story. So to answer your question, I'm sorry I got off the track.
No, it's okay.
I think it's a two-part story. It's one is we've now started to change the mindset of the select board, and I think there's a good opportunity, a huge opportunity there. It's a new world order in that community right now. There's going to be lots of changes. In a 5-person board or whatever, if you think one person's going to make a difference, well, it is. It's going to be huge. And the person that is now not there anymore, he coordinated the show for 40 years, and I think things are going to get rapidly improved quickly. And the other thought is it's got to migrate into the police department. The police chief has been there for a long time. She was connected at the hip with John Conley and D.A. Morrissey. All you have to do is look at a retirement party she had for Berkowitz, the former chief, and you look at the players who are there, and it's telling, very telling. So I think what's going to happen, I mentioned it on a post earlier today, that there has to be and Valgan is aware of this probably, and Beer is too. There's decades and decades that go into a police organization, a law enforcement organization, which is paramilitary in its own nature by itself. Decades and decades of mentorship, and when you come on, your field training officer takes you around and shows you the streets and basically tells you how you are going to act as a police officer for the rest of your career, or at least what the guidelines are. And I could speak to some issues about that. but let's just leave it that it takes decades to build a culture in a police department. It's
Yep.
going to take change to change that culture. You have to bring in someone from the outside, I believe, Val, just like Governor Healy finally did after,
Yep.
18 to 20 months of putting up with the former acting colonel. She brought in this guy from New Jersey, Noble, and that speaks volumes. She brought in somebody from the outside. She didn't fill from within inside, and that sends a message to the rank and file. Things aren't right, folks. We're changing. It's like changing a goalie when things aren't going well on the ice. It sends a message, and you better smell the coffee, or you're going to be gone too.
Right. Do you think she'll align with so Susan Harrington will align more and allow Trish Boyden to have more of a voice? Like if those two select women kind of come together, because it kind of feels that Trish just kind of goes along with everything and doesn't really question. I think at the beginning she used to question things, but now it's just like, she agrees with everything that's going on. Do you think this will give her a voice that maybe she wasn't able to speak up before?
I certainly think it will. And to Trish's credit, I speak to Trish quite often. I worked with her on the campaign, and her hands are pretty well tied, or they were tied with the odds in the numbers that were against her. Now she's coming to the game with a plan that she and Susan can work together on, and the strength in numbers. We all know that that name, and I think they can collectively very much have an impact on the community, and they're going to do it very quickly. And she's voted no on many issues that were controversial, and to her credit, she stood up and said no, or went against the momentum of the others. And I do give her credit for that. I think she's trying to work within the survival mode that she's had to put herself into. But I think now it's going to be, she's on offense, and I think Susan and she are going to do a great job together, and you're going to see immediate improvements.
Right. And then another chair is up next year.
Yes.
So there's hope there too. So hopefully there's somebody in the works that wants this seat. And yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask a real dorky question? So if
no such thing.
Right.
I know.
So if the vote is, we assume, is mostly 3-2 now in the other direction, like how does the chair get to be chair? Like, does the board vote, or does someone run specifically to be chair of the select board?
If that's addressed to me, Val, I would say I believe it's more of an attrition or a rotation type of thing. Somebody is the secretary, somebody's the chairperson, somebody else is this, and I think they kind of rotate through. I haven't really read the bylaws. I can't confirm to you right this minute with full knowledge of who would be the next chairperson, we'll say, in the next election. I can't tell you how that's going to rotate through. I know Mike Loughran currently is the chairperson, and I don't know how that would play out. But I'm sorry if that doesn't answer your question, but I don't have the knowledge or the receipts to tell you how it's going to play out for the next term.
I was looking on some of the public Canton pages, and I couldn't track down how that what's the word I want? Like the nomination or appointment of someone to be the chair work, because I was thinking that could be another benefit to the change in attitude of the board.
Sure.
Going really far into the future, and I don't want to count any chickens before they're hatched.
Okay.
But I think it's in 26, Morrissey's up.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that the success that the people of Canton have been having recently will carry that far over into the future? I mean, do you think he'll even run?
Is that for me or Beer? Do you want to jump on that? I could take a shot at it, but
Yeah,
Beer.
take a shot at it.
Well, both of you.
Well, they had a fundraiser for him recently that we had a standout at, and there was, there were significant players from Canton that showed up at that fundraiser in Quincy for Morrissey. He has run unopposed for a number of terms up until I'm hearing there's two prospective candidates that are going to run against them. I believe one female and one male. Don't hold me to that if they still have kept their papers in, but um, I think the whole county, I think the whole state is ready for change, and I think they're seeing basically how the Birchmore case was handled, how the Reed case has been handled. There's been a couple. Yeah, Enrique, my God, I spoke at the vigil back in February at Chestnut Hill, where I'm going to use a word, he was assassinated or executed. I mean, it's scary. It's scary. I really, there's no other way to put it. And I support law enforcement. I have all my life, and I still do. But God damn it! I mean, you got to have accountability and transparency, and it certainly is lacking in the Enrique case. And I'm sorry, I was talking about, I got confused. Justin Root case. Then you talk about Enrique as another issue. I mean, it just one cascades into the other. If you're familiar with the Justin Root case, are you, Val?
Yes, actually, I briefly had the opportunity to talk to his sister.
Jen.
Oh my God, Jen. Her first name just went right out of my head. When she was filing her cert petition to the United States Supreme Court. So I got a little bit of the legal background that way. And the facts of that are, I mean, okay, each case that we talk about, the facts are heartbreaking, but it's just heartbreaking. It's not very often that you're sitting around reading a legal brief and you're starting to tear up because it's such a horrific story.
Right.
But each of these cases, just the plain, usually boring facts that lawyers put in their communications, they're tragic in an overwhelming kind of way.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping, because so one of the things that lawyers do very often is they think of the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. And I'm going to put out a worst case scenario. And not because I think it could happen, but just because, you want to game out all the moves. Let's say the worst happens and, or not the worst. The worst is a conviction, but let's say there's another mistrial, which some people think is likely just because of all the forces arrayed against Karen. And we go through another trial. And it seems to me at that point, one of the few things that can stop the repeat cycle of mistrials, because I just don't see this prosecution or Morrissey ever stopping, is getting Morrissey out of office so some normal, moral person can get in there and make a different decision.
100%. I agree 100%. Go ahead, Bia. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, and that's why, he's coming up next year as well in 2026, right? His seat is up for. So hopefully we have people that are out there wanting change and are willing to run for his seat. And hopefully that isn't Hank Brennan, by the way. Hopefully not. Because that's what a lot of people speculate. That's why he was brought on to try this case. But yeah. So Peter, I know you feel this question a lot. People are always asking, which I did see on here, about WAMless and the tail light. And have you brought this information to the defense?
Yeah. Just maybe quickly summarize for perhaps people who aren't up to speed
Yeah.
with that here, if I may,
Yep.
is
Yeah. Of course.
all
Go
right.
for it.
So when you asked me a few minutes ago when I jumped into the case and I said it was April of 23, I was actually up in the office of Brian Wanless, which is an auto body in Canton, Brilliant's Auto Body, and I was actually having a conversation with him face to face in his building. He was a friend of mine for 20 odd years in the police department and as a neighbor, and we were friends, and we were also co-workers. And I was the supervisor as a sergeant, and knew his family well. So the point of my story is I had said to him and a couple of other officers on or about that first or second week in April, I said, hey, man, we worked together for years. We got in and out of some dangerous situations together. I don't want to see you get jammed up in this case. I said, if there's anything that's you need to talk to me about off the record, I'm retired, obviously. I'm not your supervisor, but I'd be glad to help you with it, or make some advice, give you some advice, and even help you get through it. I said, what you don't want to do is get caught from behind by another agency, to wit, the blue jackets with the yellow lettering that says FBI. I said, if you've got some connection, I'm not saying it's nefarious to this case, you want to get out in front of it. You don't want them to come from behind. And that's when he said to me face to face, hey, Murph, don't worry about me. The only thing I did was take the taillight out of the Lexus. And I said, what? I almost got weak-kneed, right? The only thing you did was take the taillight out of the Lexus, which is the murder weapon. It's the smoking gun, right?
That is the thing. It's the whole thing.
It's the whole enchilada. So I said to him, Brian, that is huge. What do you mean that's all you did? I said, that's the whole Megillah right there. He said, don't worry about it. They asked me to take it out. And I said, Brian, did you do a chain of custody report? Did you do a supplemental report, like on such and such a date to Attorney Val from Officer Wanless? I was asked to remove the taillight because my skill set from being in the auto body business, and they couldn't do it. And then I said, what did it look like, and who told you to do it? And he clammed up. He said, no, I can't tell you. And here we are, 20 years, 25 years, we're best friends. And now all of a sudden, he's gone into gag mode. And I said, Brian, we got a problem. You and I got a problem right now. I said, I'm really, really concerned that there's something going on in this case. If you can't tell me who told you to do it, and if you did reports. And his comment was, I don't know what they did. I didn't do anything. So telltale. It speaks volumes. So that's the story in the taillight, and that's how it got brought out. And to my knowledge today, Val, and his name, to my knowledge, hasn't appeared in any reports anywhere in the state police or the Canton police that he was brought in to remove that taillight, when he did it, what time he did it, who witnessed it. There are I understand, some video captions of him being at the scene and taking it out and putting on a pair of gloves eventually. Again, concerning.
Well, but I think, didn't his name turn up on the prosecution's witness list?
It did this time, but not the first trial.
Right. Yeah, he no one knew who he was.
Right.
The first time, but yeah. So I'm still kind of trying to puzzle that out.
Aren't we all? Yeah, I mean, the whole case starts with a taillight. It starts with none being found in the snow, with a couple of inches of snow in a leaf blower, and it proliferates into 47 pieces within a couple of days. How could you not have brought the story of that taillight into the case on the first trial, Val?
Well, and didn't one of the early, I think it was a Canton police officer who testified, said that he watched them take the taillight out. I can't remember who it was, but it was like the first week or two. And it's like and then it disappeared. Like no one ever mentioned it again. So, which to me would provide corroboration for what Brian Wanless was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I honestly, just to comment on that, I honestly, and I might be suffering from data overload on this case and the other cases that I've been involved with, but I do not recall any officer ever testifying or even me hearing that anyone else witnessed him do it. And in fact, I asked him who directed him to do it, and he took the fifth. So I cannot corroborate with you on that. And I'm not saying that didn't happen or that information isn't in testimony somewhere, Val. Please believe me when I tell you, I just can only say I haven't heard that.
Well, you know what? I can assign myself the task of digging that up because we're all on data overload.
You think?
You know, like, yeah, sometimes I start to think that things various players have said or thought are like my own thoughts. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that would be really interesting.
Yes.
Because it is very curious for them to call Wanless to the stand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Val, what you're remembering is the person who did the forensics, I think alluded to the fact that that somebody else removed the taillight. And I just think his name wasn't mentioned because I think it was a woman on the stand. I totally forgot her name, but she was testifying and she was the one that also stated there was no DNA of John's underneath the vehicle. So I believe it was a forensic lady who was given that testimony. And she just said somebody had taken out the taillight, that she didn't do it herself, was the line of questioning. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes, that is sounding familiar. So okay. I think, so there's a clue, and hopefully I can follow it back to see if I am imagining this.
Sure. Just to comment again, if you had more to the story, Val, go with it. Otherwise, I'll just make one other comment about the taillight.
No, go ahead.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So, since that conversation I had with Officer Wanless, and he was still on the job at the time, he's since retired. He's one of 13 that has since retired. I think the number's 13. We're up to 13 since the Birchmore case, which is, in a very short period of time, and cost the town a huge amount of money. But there is a story that somebody has told me that may show up in evidence at some point as a witness, that he made a comment to somebody that whatever Karen backed into in that Lexus was heavy and bowed the taillight inside, cracking it and putting a piece of the taillight into the assembly of the whole entire lens, a piece, not 46 other pieces, Val. And if reasonable people can conclude that what he was speaking to was not a human body that weighed 220 pounds, and that his arm was not bitten by man-eating taillight animal, then we can come to the perhaps conclusion that the fracture in the taillight lens that he spoke of happened when she bumped into John's Traverse backing out of her garage, and we saw the wheel cavitate, rotate just that small degree. And nobody's testified that were broken pieces in his driveway, yet 46 pieces or 47 pieces showed up in the street over the course of 4 days, but were never found by the CERT team or the Canton police. Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Yeah, that's insane. And some of it was supposedly found where his body was, and they were able to recover every single piece. And, as you would imagine, the plow drivers, that taillight wouldn't have shattered and then spread all over the lawn. It would have just come down on the ground. And the plows going behind it one after another would have at some point move that taillight to probably 3 houses down. Like, how was it all in the lawn where John's body was found? Doesn't even make sense if you even believe that crazy theory.
Right. Right. What say you, Val?
Well,
Right?
I'm thinking that what your other person had said to you lines exactly up with all the evidence that the defense has put forward. Right? You can believe that. And right now it's just hearsay, right? And only you know who the person is. So we
Correct.
don't know any, the rest of us don't know any like level of credibility or trustworthiness or all those things.
Right.
But you can slot it in to all the other testimony the defense has brought forth, to Officer Barrios, to even to Carrie Roberts, when she said she saw, I can't remember exactly her words, but she saw a piece sticking out. She never said anything about the whole thing was like smashed to pieces.
Right.
And it makes sense that, I mean, I am no engineer and I'm no physics expert, but it looks like a likely result of what we see on the film at John's house. Whereas their version of events, which has changed like every 5 seconds, only brings up more like questions, like in obvious
Reasonable
questions.
doubt?
Yes, exactly.
Not distractors, reasonable doubt.
If so, Peter, I'm sure you have probably heard many times about the information that Scanlon brought to the defense team. And I kind of put this a little bit in the same category as the treatment of Wanless in the first trial. You know, they didn't call him. How much do you think that account of what happened inside Fairview is probably true?
That Scanlon allegedly gave to Yanetti's office and then backed out of an affidavit. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have no reason to believe that whatever he passed on to the defense was anything short of, firsthand information and or truth. I have no reason to doubt his authenticity, I guess, credibility.
But I do have a comment on that, because the ID channel, when they asked David Yannetti about this, he said that he received a phone call from this person named Mike, and that basically he didn't have firsthand knowledge, that he just told them that he knew BA and knew how dangerous he was, and that just kind of put them on a path. David Yannetti did not admit that he gave him any kind of information, because he himself wasn't in that house. So any information he had would be secondhand knowledge, would it not? He just knew him because they used to box together.
Right.
Well, I think, yeah. So Turtle Boy's point, which he's made many times, is that the details that Scanlon gave to Yannetti included information that was consistent with the medical examiner's report.
Yeah, the injuries. Yeah.
Even though the report wasn't out yet. And presumably the only way you could know is if whatever Scanlon was told was essentially true. And the reason I was bringing it up is because the same way what Wanless told you, and then the other unnamed person told you about the taillight.
Yeah.
there has been no evidence inconsistent with those accounts, and until what's Wanless's first name? Is it Brian?
Yes. Another
Until
Brian. No.
until Brian Wanless, testifies in court, it is hearsay, and the Scanlon account could be double or triple. It could even be quadruple hearsay, which not just Judge Cannoni, but no judge would countenance letting in. But there just no contradictory evidence that's solid, right? Like that's forensic or like material, physical evidence that contradicts that. And that's kind of where I keep coming back to. And it's very frustrating if those accounts don't get into court. Like I don't disagree with why they're not getting into court, because you can't just have people running around telling tales and whatever.
Right.
But it's kind of like the case was solved that first week. Are you on mute, Dee?
Oh, yes, I was. Thank you for noticing. So Peter, I have a question here. It says, was OJO's car taken for repairs by POK / OJO's dad?
What was the first part of the question again? Was
John O'Keefe's car taken for repairs?
That question has been raised by many people over the course of time, and I have no receipts for where that car went anytime after the morning that we saw Karen's car make contact with it. I have no receipts. I hope somebody does.
So thank you for the $2. I got to know, but unfortunately we don't know. I do have a question for you here. For Peter, why aren't more cops and or retired cops coming forward like you? Where are they?
That's a $1,000 question too. I don't know. I mean, I could see why. I unfortunately I am only too familiar with the culture within a police organization and the fear and intimidation tactics. Officers probably have been pretty much made clear to them that if they speak out about this case, their career is going to be over on paper, if not factually over. So I can kind of I sympathize with the pressure they have on them. But for anybody retired, what are they going to do to me? I guess I know what they're going to do. They've said there's a target on my back. Don't come to Canton for any police funerals because there's a target on your back, Peter. That's been told to me by sworn officers that were still on duty and active at the time, Val. So I neglected to go to a couple of officers' funerals because of that reason. And lo and behold, there is a target on my back because they took me to court pretty much under false pretenses. So am I going to stop? No. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And I ain't got no quit. So they're going to see a lot more of me over the next couple of months during this trial. And I can assure you of that.
Yep. I mean, there's strength in numbers too. You're out there doing peaceful protests, speaking up, and we ain't got no quit.
No, and there have been instances where police organizations, police departments have taken a vote of no confidence against their chief because it gets to a point where morale is so low. They've had 12 or 13 police officers vacate the department for various other either law enforcement jobs or just got out, pulled early retirement or retirement unexpectedly, well in advance of when they had told people they were going to go out. I don't know. A union does have some power. They could take a vote of no confidence. That doesn't mean the chief is going to be terminated, but it speaks volumes as far as where the rank and file within a police organization are at as far as their mindset and want a change in the culture.
Right.
Would we ever see that in Canton? I don't know. I know there's some good officers. There's still good officers that are still working there that were under my command when I worked there, and I have no reason to believe that they are going to bed every night with extreme headaches and lack of sleep in the morning when they wake up because of what they probably know about this case.
Right. All right. I know we're coming up on an hour here, and I just wanted to know if you had any final words, statements, comments, emotional outbreaks that you'd like to share with the rest of us.
Wow.
Well, can I
That's a
ask?
litany.
Can I ask Peter about one more
Of course.
hearsay thing? I don't know, Peter, if you had heard. Bea, this is the thing that we talked about on the phone with DJ.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This mysteriously manifesting police light at the end of Karen's driveway in the morning. Have you heard about that at all, Peter?
I've just heard that in the last week or so because it's been sort of chatted about, for want of a better word, on some podcasters, blogs, and content writers. It's only come to my attention, Val, in the last, I don't know, week or 10 days about hearing anything about perhaps a police cruiser behind her car at 5 a.m. That's all I can tell you. Is it's kind of new and fresh information that I haven't been able to verify, and it's only come to me in the last 10 days, which I probably heard on the media, common media posts anyway. If that answers.
Have you seen it? Did you get a chance to see it at all?
No, I have not. Have you? Did you see it? Does it look like a police cruiser with blue lights?
It really does.
Okay. All right.
But I think I saw it on it was Video Jesus.
Okay.
Talking on, I think, John Camo's show.
All right.
And in order to see it, she did have to slow the video down, and she explained a lot about some stuff that I honestly didn't understand about the cameras and what there's kind of the strobing effect from the lights and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But it really, really looks like you see Karen reach the end of the driveway. You see her turn left out of the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
You see headlights come on behind her, like I think they said 8 or 10 seconds behind her. Then you see red and blue lights alternating right, at the height of the top of a vehicle. And then you see that vehicle pull out behind her. And at some point when it's pulling out, then the lights shut off, but you can kind of still see the headlights following her.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Bea, we talked with DJ, and it seems like this is highly unlikely to be evidence that would actually get into trial because they don't have really way to authenticate it in any evidence that logs anything like that were probably never even created if it is really a Canton police cruiser.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they were created, they're gone now. They would be beyond foolish to keep anything like that around at this point. But I was shocked and fascinated, and it was the other moment in the first trial during one of the pretrial hearings, the moment when Yannetti dropped that Higgins had done a proffer with the feds. And this moment, because there's no other reason. I'm sorry, it's not a coincidence. Some police cars just hanging around in the middle of the night outside of John O'Keefe's house and just happens to follow Karen down the road. I mean, it's ridiculous. Those two moments are like, oh my God, but it's all information that that probably can't get into court, but it made my jaw drop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the same thing, and I think really all that's going to prove is that the fix had been in before they found his body. But at the end of the day, Arca said John didn't die by that car. So whatever, story happened with that, I feel like only brings it to the fact that the fix had been in. Maybe they were watching her, but it still doesn't change the fact that Karen didn't hit John and John didn't die because of her car. So
Yes, and I think the reason why the defense team and I feel like all of us kind of in the first trial were riding so high by the time the defense completed their cases, we were all like, okay, Arca just blew the entire prosecution out of the water. And then obviously it was such a disappointment when the jury came back with the results that they did. And I still feel that for all of our analysis about, what went wrong with the jury and what can they change, and I think there's, tremendous potential for them to remake the case. Maybe remake is maybe not the right word. I don't mean like a total overhaul, but reposition the case.
Mm-hmm.
But I am still bothered because I feel like there's something about what the jury did that isn't quite explained.
Okay.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, sorry, I don't mean to prolong that
No,
end
that's
of the
okay.
show or anything, Bia.
No, that's fine. So Peter, do you have any final words for us today, or emotional outbursts, whatever you'd like? Take your pick.
Well, if you've seen a couple of things, if you've seen the video of the auditorium on Saturday, and the direction I started to head in, I had some very, very poignant questions that I was going to ask, but as you saw, I was kind of shot down, for want of a better word, and people turned their back, and I didn't get a chance to ask follow-up questions. But I guess what I'd like to do is perhaps consider a GoFundMe for having maybe a carpenter build me a soapbox over the next couple of months.
That was awesome.
A deluxe soapbox.
Something with the American flag or the scales of justice on it, Val, and
Yeah.
I don't
Exactly.
whatever we can come up with. But no, about the case in seriousness, I mean, we're talking about a brother officer that has been murdered, and there is nothing humorous about that going forward in this next trial. What I think needs to come out, in my opinion, and I was surprised more wasn't made of it, and see what you two think, is I believe, if my memory serves me right, is that there were 3 liters of blood that were allegedly discussed by the autopsy doctor that his body was missing. He had 3 liters of blood. And we know a head wound usually will bleed profusely. The ground was frozen that morning. They've said it was what caused the fracture to his head. To my opinion, he would have had to have been dropped from a crane at 50 feet and land right on his head to do any kind of damage at all, not get hit by and deflect off and skid along the snow. But, we don't have any photos. We have nothing of him being spun around or skidding across the surface of the lawn. No pool of blood of 3 liters at all. But here's one of the biggest things that hasn't come out either, is in the investigation, and why I believe that the Canton police and the police chief and the command staff should have been put on administrative leave soon after the accident or murder, I guess, for want of a better word. And that is, a police officer should have gone in that ambulance. That ambulance was a continuation of the crime scene. The crime scene got split up between 34 Fairview and the ambulance ride. That body contained, and his clothing and everything was laden with evidence. It could be dog saliva. It could be other DNA from other combatants. He could have had a bullet hole. He could have had a knife sticking out of his back. you know, and I know, and we saw it in videos that and I was an EMT for most of my career. The first thing you do is you cut with scissors and remove clothing and expose the body to find out trauma and wounds, fractures, bleeding. There were no wounds consistent with being hit by a car from his chin down to his feet, but there was a lot of evidence on his right arm that he'd been bitten by a dog. Now, had a police officer been in that ambulance, when they cut that arm sleeve open, they could have communicated right back to dispatch or back to the crime scene incident commander, which they never established. We can talk about that all night long. But they should have communicated back, hey, we're almost to the hospital. This guy's got what appears to be lacerations and puncture wounds from a canine, and there is a canine at their house. Or if you want to play dumb, we didn't know there was a canine. Knock on the door and ask them if they've got a dog. See if you get a dog barking. You tell me, was it intentional that nobody went in that ambulance and they didn't? And then you see the evidence piled up in a pile next to the gurney, and who knows how long that had been there. That was later in the day when Proctor was there. I mean, it
was on the ground.
It was on the floor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the point I'm making is, had the information been observed by an officer going in that crime scene, maybe his body core temperature would have been raised to a point where he might have quickly or suddenly or briefly regained consciousness and made a dying declaration.
Yep.
Terrible absence of police protocol.
Yep. And how about you, Val? Do you have any final words for us?
I'm still a little bit thinking about what Peter was saying. I think that the phrase weaponized incompetence is kind of what covers most of the case. And I would almost add, I think it's kind of a separate category of like weaponized inadequacy, because it's not just the evidence that was actively disappeared or actively messed around with. It's all the evidence that they failed to get. Mm-hmm. Right? Like to me, it seems to me that a police officer's job, if they're doing an investigation, that what leads you follow through to the end is kind of the biggest discretionary piece, right? You need the most judgment to decide, oh, is this a red herring, or is this something to pursue? Do we want to I can't think of a good example right now, but like the whole thing about going for the geolocation data, and I mean, we know that was messed up, but failing to go after data that you knew would be available. Mm-hmm. It's a fuzzier category than the other kinds of messing with evidence, but it's just as like pernicious. And it's also, I don't know if either of you have been following at all the Delphi case in Indiana. That same thing happened there. That was also a very bad police investigation. Like, whatever you think of like the result of that case, and I think it was horrible. But the very obvious things they just didn't do. Mm-hmm. Like, and they were very critical things, like determinative, like you'd have the answer, you'd know, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I don't have, I usually do have a pretty good rant ready, but I didn't know you'd be asking, so I hadn't queued one up.
All right, that's all right. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to come on Calling All Beings, and thank you for not backing out just because DJ was sick. So thank you for a great conversation, and for all you guys had, your thoughts, opinions. And yes, so thank you so much for being on. So I'll let you guys go, and I'll just close out the show here. Thank you so much.
You did a great job, Val. Very nice talking with you, discussing the case. Okay, stay well.
All right.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye bye.
Bye.
Have a great night. Bye bye.